Austin Astral Projection would like to welcome Susan Austin Taylor.
Thank you.
That's why your middle name is Austin, right?
Yeah.
Because you like Austin so much.
No, because we're descended from the guy it was named for.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
I don't know if any of you, I don't think I've met any of you before. I have a website. It's on the card that if you didn't get a card, I'll give you one later. I've been an astral projector since I was a child, as far back as I can remember. I've been a channel medium for 40 years, and I'm an empath. I don't know if anybody here is an empath. That's a tough one. That's a toughie, especially if you work with. I'm a medium, so I work with the dead and the dying a lot, and empathy helps, but it's also very it's difficult because you feel everything. You feel everything, and it's very hard to filter all of that stuff out. So, but that's just what we're talking about astral projection. So I was just giving you a little background. Like I said, I've been doing this since I was. One of my earliest memories is a crib memory of standing at the side of my crib and being really, really mad that I couldn't fly. You know, we're supposed to be able to fly. You know, we are. It was just, you know, I had no doubt. In the crib, I knew that. When I was a child, I think a lot of the things that I did when I was a child, I made up a lot of little games for myself when I was a child, and I think a lot of them were really conducive to actually getting out in a controlled way later. If I was punished, you know, sit to my bedroom, I really, really hated that. I used to pout and lie on my bed, and I would imagine, you know, that I'd just unzip my body and I would sneak out where no one could see me. I would go out into the hallway and I would go look at my parents, you know. It's like, ha ha, you know, you think I'm in my bedroom, but I'm not. But I made up all kinds of little games for myself when I was little that were, like I said, they just really were helpful later on. And I guess when I was about 5 years old, I started experiencing what I call it cataplexy. And so, you know, it's a thing where you can't move, and it frozen, you just, all you want to do, you feel like you can't breathe or anything, and you just have to move something to stop it. It's really scary for a kid. It's scary for an adult if you don't know what it is and you experience it for the first time. But it was really frightening. It was frightening to me. So I always forced myself out of it. And my dad was ex-military. He was really strict about us getting up at a certain time, breakfast at a certain time, everything. And if I lay in bed, if I woke up early and I laid there, this would always happen. And I would start to do this little separation thing. It would freak me out anyway. And plus, I knew that if I wasn't out of bed and at the table at a certain time, my dad would come in and pour water on me or something. I mean, he was really strict. And and I thought, I honestly thought that I would die if I didn't break free of that. So I did that for the longest time, and finally, I think I was about somewhere between 6 and 8. It happened all the time. Always, it was almost every day. One day I just got tired of it. I just got tired of it happening and scaring me so bad, and having to break free of it. And it happened to me one morning, and I remember thinking, I wonder what would happen if I don't do anything. You know, what's the worst that could happen? You know, if I die, I die. I'm tired of this, so I'm just going to lay here, and I'm not going to break free. And if I die, I die. And so I lay there, and it was very pleasant, actually. It was like this very smooth, vibrational kind of thing that was going on, and I'm completely lucid, completely conscious, and I realized that I must be breathing. You know, my body must be breathing. So I started to call that autopilot when I was a child. I always called it autopilot when I was little, because is your body just goes on doing what it needs to do to keep you going. And when I found out that wasn't going to kill me, I wasn't afraid of that anymore. And I always ask everybody if they've ever had that experience. Has anybody had that cataplexy? Yeah. Have you ever used it to get out of body? Yeah. It's one of the simplest ways to get out of body is just to let that go until the vibrations get smooth enough. It gets to a certain point, you just kind of know, and you move out. I figured that out later, a lot later. But when I got into my teens, I really didn't want to. I never told my parents about any of this stuff. It's like, I thought that would be a trip to the doctor. Didn't want that. And but when I got into my teens, the first, like when I was, grown, pretty much grown, 15, whatever, I had mono in high school, and I was running a really high fever one night, and I tried to call my mother from the bedroom that I was in a completely other end of the house, and she didn't hear me. So as sick as I was, I got out of bed and I went into her bedroom and said her name. I tried to get her to talk to me, and she wouldn't wake up. My dad wouldn't wake up. My brothers wouldn't wake up. And I thought I was dying because I was just burning up with fever. And I kept feeling like I was top heavy, and I became aware, that I didn't feel my feet on the floor, but I was so out of it, sick, and when I couldn't wake anyone up, I just went back to bed. And when I got into the bedroom, when I saw myself lying there, it was the first time I really ever looked at myself from out of body, and I was really startled. I thought I died. And that was why they couldn't hear me. And it's like, oh, they're going to wake up and I'm going to be dead and they're going to all feel bad. But when I thought that, it pulled me back into my body. And so I sweated it out that night, and I was, got over it. And shortly after that, I got my driver's license. And I had, from the time I got my driver's license, I started having trouble staying in my body while I was driving. I would be driving along, and all of a sudden I would just feel myself separate. It was very pleasant, very, very pleasant feeling, but I would be floating behind myself, looking at myself driving, and I'm driving, and I'm back here watching myself drive, and it was really scary because I would be so shocked, I would just slam myself back into my body and pull over and deep breathe for a while and slap yourself in the face, whatever, can't do this. But I didn't know how to stop it. It was just natural. It just was so natural for me. And this went on for, actually, I guess that went on for years. It finally stopped when my children were preschool age. I finally figured out a way to stop it, so that I could drive. I can drive now, and it doesn't, but it happened one day while I was driving with my children, and that was really frightening to me. It was like I never missed a beat driving. which is really strange, you know, but I'm back here, you know, I'm back here watching all of this happen. And, but it took having my children in the car with me to really figure out how to stop that from happening so I could drive, you know, and not be afraid of that anymore. So I stopped that. And then when my children started school is when I really had time to devote to astral projection, because I loved it. I loved being out there, and my experience was I would usually become conscious after I'd already gotten out, and I loved it. It was just, you know, it was natural to me. I was just, you know, it's bliss. It was just, to me, it was bliss. And but after my children started school, I used to devote at least 2 hours every morning when I would get home from taking them to school, crawl back in bed, have all the doors locked, crawl back in bed, and just work on this. And I would always, there were days that over a period of about 5, 6, maybe even 7 years, that I was going out of body 5 days a week at least, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And in the beginning, it was just for fun. I thought it was just for fun, you know. I didn't know anybody else. I didn't even know what to call this. I didn't know anybody else did this. I'd never read anything about it. So I thought that I was mapping territory for everybody else, you know. So I kept really good records. I've got records going back, God, till I was, I think, 17 of all of this. And actually the first time when I really decided that I was going to keep very good records, and I was going to try to learn everything I could about the process. I had laid down one day. It was actually Christmas Day one year, and my husband had taken my children to his brother's house, and I was in bed, gave me a break, you know. I got a break from the kids, and I laid down. As soon as I laid down, I really was trying to take a nap. I wanted to take a nap, and but I just felt like I couldn't. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to fall asleep. So I just said, well, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go over there. I'll just drive over there. And I couldn't get up properly. I felt like it was just like I weighed a ton. And I had to, I turned on my side and I had to push myself into a sitting position, swing my legs off the bed. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, why I weighed so much, I was so heavy. And I heard this strange sound. It was a hissing sound. It is the sound that, you know, the little sparklers that you light, you know, yeah, it sounded like that. And I thought, where is that coming from? Where is that noise? Because I was home by myself, but I knew that it was coming from where I just got out of bed. And so I looked back like this, and I was still pushing myself away from the bed to try to stand up. And here's my body in the bed, and I'm in the process of projecting. So I'm right in the middle of projecting, and I can see as my hands start to separate from my body, there's this ring of sparks all around my astral body. It was silver green, and it was making this noise that I was hearing. It was making this sound, and I was just delighted. I was like, oh, I'm gonna just have so much to write about. And so I kept pushing off, right? And the feeling of this separation, I wanted to know, be able to describe this perfectly to everybody. If you actually just are lucid through the whole separation process, how this feels and sounds and everything, and what it felt like to me, and it's always felt like that ever since. Is like if you get your clothes out of the dryer, right, and you have the socks stick together, and you pull them apart, and there's that staticky. That's what it's like. It's like we're almost the astral body is almost electrostatically charged to mesh with the physical body. And when you separate, I heard the sound, and I saw the sparks. And so as soon as I got free, I knew that I needed to get away from my body. I wanted to get away from it because I didn't like the way it looked. I really didn't like the way it looked. I couldn't believe that I lived in that thing. And I just went straight through the roof and went over to where my children were, and I just hovered, for a while, and I watched. I could see where the motorcycles were parked and all of this, and everything that was going on. And this probably lasted 15 minutes, and I came back and I called my husband and I told him, I said, Rod's motorcycle's parked here, you parked here, so-and-so was over here about 15 minutes ago, right? And, he confirmed all of that. And so I thought, oh, this is just so cool, I'm going to keep really good records from now on. And I didn't want to go back to my body. From that time on, I just devoted so much time to it. Huge amounts of time to it, at least 5 days a week, at least, and probably once on weekends, to a couple times a month. And it was just so pleasant. How many in here have had lucid astral projections? Yeah, so you know what I mean. It's so pleasant. It's just it's such a blissful state. You don't want to go back, but I would go back. I would go back and keep my notes, and so I figured I was going to be very analytical, and a little bit later. I found out you have to get away from your physical body when you do get out. You have to get away from it. You have to get at least 6 feet away from it, or it'll pull you back in. So I found that out really quickly. But I still had this curiosity. I wanted to know what my physical body felt like to touch it from my astral body. But I didn't want to get pulled back in. So one day I was standing at the foot of the bed and I was looking back at it. And it's just it's just so disgusting to me. I don't even know why. But I just reached, and you can just reach across a room without moving, And I reached all the way across the bed and I touched my face and it felt like clay to me. It felt like clay. And I said to myself at that moment, I am not getting back in that thing. I'm not. That is not, that is disgusting, and I'm not getting back in it. And I really did try. I've tried on multiple occasions not to come back to it because it's just, you realize that it's a shell. It's a vehicle, and it is very heavy and gross. Not gross like ugh, but it's a heavy thing, and the astral body is light and it's graceful and it's but anyway, I had logged all of the details of what it felt like to separate from the body, all of this stuff, and I practiced this often, and even in those early days of just having fun, I was always aware that there was usually someone out to the side, one side or the other, that just watched me. Usually, they just observed me, and I would see them peripherally, but they didn't speak to me. They were just observing me, and I was comfortable with that. I wasn't afraid of that. I'd already learned how to handle people that you meet out of body. You have to be very careful about that because everybody that's out there doesn't have great intentions. You have to be very careful about that, and I learned early on how to deal with that also. But the ones that were always off peripherally, they seemed different than me somehow. I knew that they didn't belong in my physical world. I knew that, and I wasn't afraid of them. So, and at times I actually felt protected by them. But they just watched me, and I did stupid things, and You know, just, I had fun. I used to, it was fun to just pass through walls and feel where the studs were in the wall, and just silly things, just fun. You know, and I was allowed to do that for several years, just have fun and get a lot of experience at doing that, and they were always there. They were always there. And then the experiences started to change, and they became, some of them were really frightening, and I would forget that I was out of body. I would think that this was something because looking at it now, I understand what was happening, because it was actually a period of training. So first I got to have fun and just get a lot of experience, and then it was like, okay, can we use you? You know, we have to find out if we can use you. So the way they did that was to create scenarios that I would be put in, and I would find myself in the middle of something where someone was either being hurt or something traumatic was going on, and there would be 2 or 3 of these people standing over here, and it would say, what will you do? And I would think that at that time it was so real, it felt physical to me, like this was physically happening, and I would always, without even thinking, put myself in harm's way to try to stop what was happening or to help whoever was the victim of this. And I think the one that I really felt the most threatened by was a scenario that was created for me one night, and I was out of body, and just suddenly I was in a car. I was riding in a car with one of these people, and they pulled up to a house, and I knew I was supposed to get out, but I wasn't sure why, you know, and I just said, are you coming with me? And they said, no, you have to do this on your own. And so I got out, and once again, I thought this is happening physically, because it was so real and so immediate. The danger was so immediate. So that's what they wanted, was to get my reaction. How would I react in an immediately dangerous situation? And this particular night, I went up to this house, and I just passed through the door, and there was, before I even got there, I could hear the ruckus going on inside, the yelling. It was a husband and wife who were just having this horrible fight, and the wife was really out of control, and there was something not right about her. I could look at her eyes and tell there was just something not right about her. And there's a baby in a high chair sitting there, and she was standing by the baby, and they were having this horrible argument that was about to get physical. And he said he was leaving, he was taking the baby. And she said, no, you will not take the baby. And she put her hand behind the baby's head and just slammed it down into the tray of the high chair. And I was so angry at that point. I was so furious that I went over to them, and they saw me. I mean, this was just like this, you know. And I took the baby out of that high chair, and I said, no, I'm taking the baby. And she said, no, no one's taking this baby, you know. And I said, I'm taking the baby to the hospital. You know, you've hurt the baby. It had a big swelling place on his head. And I said, I'm taking the baby to the hospital. And she called her brother, who lived next door, on the telephone. And when I went out the door with the baby, they were trying to stop me, but I went out the door with the baby toward the car, and these 2 brothers of hers came and confronted me, and one of them had a gun, and said, give us the baby. And I said, no, I'm not, I won't. Look what she did to it. Look what she did to this baby. I'm taking the baby to the hospital. And he pointed the gun at my head, and he said, I'll shoot you. And I said, shoot me. You'll have to shoot me to get the baby. But he didn't shoot me. And I got in the car, And I told this man who was driving, I said, drive to the hospital. And he said, okay, where's the hospital? And I said, I don't know, because I didn't even know where I was. And so he smiled. He just smiled. He started driving. He said, tell me when we need to turn. And I was trying to figure out where I was. We were in a city, and and I knew it was urgent that we get to a hospital. And I was just frantic to find, and I said, but I don't know where the hospital is. I just don't you know? I mean, don't you know? And I said, no, I don't know where there's a hospital. And he was smiling. It was like he wasn't taking this seriously. I said, why are you smiling? This baby's hurt. And he looked down, he looked over at the baby, and then I looked down, and there was no baby there. And then there was no car. And I was just standing there with him. And I said, what is this? What is this? And he said, just a test. Just a test. We need to see, if we can use you. And so this went on. These scenarios went on for about 2 years. There were times that I was really afraid for my life, but I always put myself in harm's way. I never questioned that. I always decided that I would rather, fine, kill me, but I'm going to do this. And, after 2 years, then it changed again. And they began to come and get me and take me. I would accompany them to accident sites. At first it was car accidents, and these were real. These were not something that they created. These were real. And the first one they took me to was a really bad car accident, and the car had rolled several times, and it had thrown 3 people from the car, and there was one person who was still in the back seat, stretched out across the back seat. And so we're hovering about 40 feet or 50 feet above the car, and I can see into the car. I can see into it through the roof. It landed upright, but I could still see this person in the car, and I could see the people scattered, on the road, in the ditch, and the person who had taken me there said, are they alive or are they dead? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. How do you tell, Let me go take a pulse. I don't know. And he said, look at them, really look at them. And so I looked, and I said, what am I supposed to see? And he said, just look at each one of them, and you'll know. And so I looked at all of them, and the only one that had anything odd that I saw, and they were all unconscious, the one in the car had a little light right where their heart is. It was like a flame. And I told him, I said, there's the one in the car has like this little flame right here. And he nodded, and he said, when you see that, you will know that the body is viable and that their life can be saved. If you don't see that light, they're already gone, and it's too late to save them. So remember that. And so we had a couple of years of that, where they would come. It was almost always at night, but sometimes in the daytime, because I was still going out in the daytime and having fun and whatever, but so many accident scenes and crime things and natural disasters. I was at the site of the Mexico earthquake in the mid-'80s, and I went through the rubble out of body, and I didn't even know what building I was in, but I was going through the rubble, and I was directed to go through the rubble, and I did. And I was going through the rubble, and I came to this pocket where I don't know what had kept it from collapsing, but there was just a small pocket, and there were babies in there. There were babies in bassinets, and they were alive. And I didn't know what to do. You know, I came back to my body. I was allowed to go back to body. All I was supposed to do was just observe that, you know. And so I told my husband, and I called a friend, and I said, there's babies in a hospital in the rubble, and they're alive, and I don't know which hospital. I don't speak Spanish. If I call somebody and tell them that, they're going to think I'm crazy, you know, but there are babies alive. Well, I think it was about, I don't know how many days when they were going through rubble, they did find them. They did find these babies, and there was also a doctor who was in that area who had survived and had been giving these babies water to keep them hydrated, to keep them alive. They did find them. But this was just, it was a training period to go and do this. And when they finally turned me loose on my own, and I still do it to this day, when they finally turned me loose on my own, it was after several years of them being with me, or them taking me to where it was. And I screwed up so many times too, because I have just a wicked sense of humor. And some things just strike me as funny that are just macabre, that just would strike me as really funny. And I know the very first time they let me interact with someone, really interact with someone who had been in an accident and did not know they were dead. We were in a restaurant. We'd gone to a restaurant. And I felt like I was on the West Coast. I don't even know why. But there was a couple, and the woman that was with me at this time had red hair. And this is one of my guides, I guess, or teachers, or whatever, whoever was instructing me. And we were standing in this restaurant, and I said, okay, who am I here for? And she said, you have to figure that out. And so I looked around, and everybody looked the same. I mean, it was just a restaurant. People were being served, and I said, I can't tell. And she said, look again. And so, you know, watched every table, and there was one table, the only thing that was out of order was that no one had waited on them. And it was a couple, it was a man and a woman, and they were sitting there talking, and they were not happy because they'd been there for a little while, and they were talking to each other about the fact they went there, like this was their date night. They always went to the same restaurant. They had their usual table, everything, but this night they hadn't been waited on. And then I understood. I said, it's them, right? And she said, yes. And she said, now you get to interact with them. You know, and you have to explain to them what's going on here. So I went over to them, and I stood by them, and they saw me. They could see me, and I guess they thought I was going to wait on them or something. I don't know. And I just stood there, and to me, it just struck me as just so funny because I knew what had happened. They'd been in a car wreck on the way there. The impact had been so hard, it just projected them right out of their bodies, and they just went right onto the restaurant. And we're sitting at the table waiting to be waited on, and it's never going to happen. And to me, that was just too funny. You know, that was just too funny. You know, how can you not know? You know, and I thought, oh, this, you know, this is just the best opportunity. These people are essentially ghosts. You know, what people would think of as ghosts. And I said, I'll never get another opportunity like this again. So instead of saying something, you know, reassuring to them, the first thing I did was go, boo! I booed a ghost. I booed ghosts. And it startled them, you know, and they looked and said, why did you do that? And as soon as I did it, and they asked me, why did you do that to us? And the lady came over and pulled me aside, and she said, no. you don't boo the dead people. You don't do that. Say, go try it again. Give it another try. And I went back over and I said, does anything seem odd to y'all? And I say, y'all out of body. And it's telepathic. It's always telepathic. I say, y'all. I said, doesn't anything seem out of order here to you? And they said, no. And they wanted me to go away. They were really annoyed with me. And I said, Nothing seems weird about this to you. And they said, well, they won't wait on us, and they've never done this before. And this is our favorite restaurant. And, we're just a little upset about that, but everything else is okay. Go away, we don't, we're just waiting to be waited on. And I thought, well, okay, how do I tell them this? And I thought about it for a second. I just said, okay, here's the deal. On the way to the restaurant, you had a car accident. And you were killed instantly. And it happened so quickly, you never felt it. And I said, you just kept going. And you've come to this restaurant, and you've been sitting here all evening waiting to be waited on. It's not going to happen. But I said, think back. Do you remember the accident? And when they thought about it, they remembered the beginning of the accident. They remembered that they were going to be in an accident, but they didn't remember the impact or anything. And when they realized what happened, they laughed. Then they laughed and thought, oh, that was easy. That was so easy, And they said, well, what do we do now? And I said, now you go home. You just go home, go to the light. And most of them seem to know where to go. Some of them don't. But they left. They were, they were fine. So I screwed that one up. I screwed that one up to begin with, and I screwed several of them up, just because, like I said, my sense of humor is just weird. And the next one that I messed up, I always tell people about the ones I mess up, because if you ever get the opportunity, if you're adept at astral projection, and you're willing to do this, they can use you. And it's a wonderful service. This is a wonderful service that you can perform. And the next one that I screwed so many up, I just flubbed so many. But the ones that stand out with that one, because that was the first one, and then on down the line a little bit, they took me to a place where a plane had gone down in water. And I thought that this was the Gulf of Mexico, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't even know where it was. I'm not sure. But the plane had gone down, and they had tried to make a belly landing on the water, and they had already radioed for help and everything. But the plane was sitting on the bottom. It was sitting on sand, intact. It was intact. And it was just bizarre. It was the first time I'd ever been underwater out of body in the first place. And so I saw the plane as I was approaching it, and when I got down to it, it was the most bizarre thing that I've ever seen in my life, because the pilot of the plane was sitting on the nose of the plane, and he had taken something and tied a string onto it and made a hook, and he was sitting there fishing, sitting underwater. There were 4 people on board, a husband and wife and their little boy and the pilot, and that was it. It was a small plane. And the pilot was trying to fish off the nose of the plane. The husband was inside the back of the plane, and I could hear him moving things around. And the mother was sitting in the door of the plane, and the little boy was on the sand playing with a toy. And it was just, and there were fish swimming around. And I couldn't even understand how they could not know that they had died. How could they not know this? And so I just, plopped down right in front of the mother, and I said, well, what you doing? And she said, she was really startled to see me there. And she said, we had engine trouble and we made a belly landing. And she said, we're good. We don't need your help. We've called Coast Guard, and we're waiting. We're okay. And she was afraid of me. And I was, and you can laugh out of body. I don't know if anybody's ever seen anything funny out of body and laughed. You can laugh out of body. It's telepathic again. But I laughed, and it made her mad, and she was more afraid of me. And she was holding the edge of the door with just a death grip. And she didn't want me around the little boy. And so I kept a little distance, and I didn't know how to explain this to her. So, and I said, how long ago how long have you been waiting? She said, not long, it hasn't been long. They'll be here. We don't need you, they'll be here. And so I finally said, no, they won't. They won't be here. I said, here's what happened. Okay, you made the belly landing, and the plane sunk, and you drowned. You all drowned, but you don't know it. You don't realize that you've already passed. What you're afraid of has already happened, and there's no reason to stay with this plane. You have a party waiting for you. You need to go home. And as soon as the pilot heard me say, as soon as I said that and he heard it, he just dropped the fishing pole and he just took off. He was gone, headed for the surface. And the father came out, and he was standing in the doorway, and he was listening to me. It's like really, is this? And I said, there's fish, and he looked around, and he kind of, he smiled, he laughed, and the mother was just getting more afraid all the time, and she would not release her grip on that door. And the dad came out, and he took the little boy by the hand, and they just rose to the surface, and they were out of there, and she wouldn't let go. And I told her, I said, honey, you've got to let go of this plane. You have to follow them and go home. You don't belong here. I don't know how long you've been here, but you don't belong here. You got to go, And she said, no, I can't. I can't let go. I can't let go. And I said, why? Why can't you let go? And she said, because I can't swim. And I was just hysterical by that. I was just laughing so hard. It was just, and I remember I turned a flip over backwards in the water and came right down in front of her, and I said, honey, you don't have to swim, you can fly. And I said, now follow them, go. And she, very, very cautiously let go, and just moved away a little bit. And when she was confident, that everything was okay, she wasn't going to drown, and she very slowly rose up to the surface, and they made it, But I went through 2 or 3 years, I would say, with them, with guides with me. They would always be with me to make sure. They would tell me when I was screwing up, when I would do something wrong, when I would say the wrong thing, or whatever, or when humor was not appropriate. Then after that, I just started projecting out and going to these scenes by myself. And I've been doing it ever since. I couldn't even tell you how many times. And most of them, a lot of them we could never document. A lot of them we could. I could wake up in the morning and tell my husband, go turn on the news and find out which plane died. I think there's about 64 people on board, and because there were there were between 12 and 15 people out of body there, and each out of body person can handle 4 or 5 people who are dead or dying. So I think there were probably between 60 and 64 people. There were actually 62 people on this plane. But he went and turned the TV on, and it was on the news. The plane had crashed during the night, and I remember being drawn out just by instinct to go. And we got there. There were the other people out of body too, and we were standing in this clearing, in this wooded area, but there was a clearing, and we were just looking up and waiting for the plane to come over. And we saw the plane come over and saw it crash, and then like I said, if one person out of body can handle or take care of 4 or 5 who are dead or dying. And that's really all I remember of that one, except, the next morning we checked, we listened to it on the news, and everyone was killed. Everyone on board was killed. It was bad, it just was a fireball. But I've been doing that since I was probably in my upper 20s, and I'm still doing it today. Lately, the last 4 or 5 years, I made a request that if it was not necessary, if it was not absolutely necessary for me to be there out of body, could they just come to me? You know, because I have insomnia a lot. I've had insomnia a lot my entire adult life, and so I really need my sleep. So if they can come to me, if not, if I have to, I'll still go, you know, and I do still go. But about half the time they come to me now. And so that's kind of the history. You know, I've had the people that are hardest to convince are the ones whose bodies have been destroyed or disfigured to a point where they don't recognize their body. And the hardest part about working with them is just convincing them that they are dead, because even if you get out of body, like I said, the first time I looked back and reached over and touched my body, I was convinced that it wasn't me in the first place. There's no way that thing is me. It's ugly, it's gross, it feels like clay, and I'm not getting back in it. And I have repeatedly tried to stay out, and I'm always forced back in. But so I understand why traumatic injuries, traumatic things, oftentimes people will hang around because they need that closure. They need to understand what happened. I know one night a man came to me. This was actually the brother of the man who had been killed in a motorcycle accident, and apparently his brother had already passed, and he said, I need you to help me talk to my brother. And so he took me to where his brother was. It was the accident scene. It had just happened, and they were putting the body in a body bag, or what they were. I mean, it was torn. It was really torn up, and there were pieces that had been severed. And it was a horrible accident, and there was nothing that was really recognizable. And so his brother was standing there, and I asked him, I said, do you understand what's happened here? This is your accident, and you passed in this accident. And he said, no, that's not me. He said, I'm fine, you know, boom, boom, boom. You know, look, I'm solid, I'm fine. This is not me, but somebody's hurt. Even if somebody was killed, there's something really bad happened here. And I said, no, this is you. And he said, no, it's not. It's not me. And I mean, and I never encountered somebody who just wouldn't believe. That was the first time I'd ever encountered that. And I had to figure out, what am I going to do now? And the only thing, and I don't know how this works, but it works. I had to reach into the body bag and take the pieces out and try to place them back in order, so that maybe there would be something he would recognize. And I would say I had about 3/4 of it out, and I remember it was his left arm that had been severed here. He'd lost his arm. And when I set the arm out and I put the arm against the body, I don't know if it was a wrist watch or a tattoo, but he recognized it. And he looked down and he went, huh, I did die. And then he looked over at his brother and he said, okay, I'm ready. And they left. And they just, you know, they went into the light and they were gone. But that, you know, that's where astral projection has taken me, into that. And I do it, and I don't mind it. I don't. In fact, I love it. I love it. And I love it when they come to me. It's fine. It happens all the time. My husband's used to it. My children are used to it. But still, the times that I can just get out and go do what I want to do are just complete bliss. And everybody who's been out lucid, you know that, right? Y'all know that. I mean, y'all have done it. It's bliss, and it's more home-like and than this, you know. And I always dread going back into body. And once you get back into body and you're situated in your body, it's fine, you know, you feel fine, it's okay, you know, and it was wonderful, can't wait to get out again. But I have tried about 4 or 5 times to stay out, just to see if I could stay out and let my body, if my body would just die and let me stay out and go on, just go on home. You know, I didn't want to be here. You know, there's a lot better real estate farther on. And so that's where my journey with astral projection led me into that. And that was actually the reason that I first started teaching it and speaking in public, because I thought, if I'm doing this, if they trained me to do this, they can train others, and they probably have for, you know, been doing it all along. So people who do this or are trying to learn to do this should know about it, because it's something that you can offer yourself up in service to, but you have to make that decision. I realized that when I was a child, I had made that decision when I was a child, that that's what I was in this world for, was in some way to help some kind of suffering. I never knew how. You know, it's like, I'm not skilled, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to be a nurse or a doctor. But I knew. And so in my prayers, before I stopped my prayers, the last thing I would say was, use me. I'm here, use me. You know, don't know how you're going to do it, but use me. And this is how that turned out. And so if anybody's interested, it is something that you can do. I guess you have to go through a period of training with them so that you know how to deal with the people. And you know, now, I mean, I still flub ever so often. You know, if I'm sleepy and someone comes into the room, you know, I've said silly things. And people, it's not just going to be people that passed away yesterday or tonight or last week. I've had Civil War soldiers. I've had more soldiers pass through our bedroom than anything, you know, and starting in the Civil War all the way through Iraq and what's going on now. And I had one soldier come through there one night that it was a Civil War soldier. He was a Union soldier. And he had a piece of paper in his hand, and I said, how can I help you? And he said, well, take this. I'm supposed to deliver this to, and then it was like I lost what he was trying to say, and I was hearing letters. And he said, to USG and W. And I said, okay, wait, that's not a word. What he said, and so he more clearly said, no, I need you to give this to USG in W. And I was, okay, so USG is in W, where's W? He said, Washington. And I said, are you talking about Ulysses Grant? And he said, yes. And he said, this is urgent. And he said, I have a dispatch. And he said, I have to deliver this. And I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't think I can do that. You know, I didn't think to ask his regiment. I didn't think to ask his name. I've since thought of that. And I told him, I said, I don't know if I can do that. You don't understand. There's a time difference, and I don't know how to do that. And he left. You know, he said, okay, you know, thank you for trying, and he left. Since then, I understand how that works, you know, because there's no time out of body. There's no such thing as time, except right here. So, but I would say 50% of what I deal with are soldiers now, and a lot of Iraqi soldiers. The last one was a week ago, and he was a suicide. And it broke my heart, just broke my heart, because he would not cross over. And I sit up, I talk to them, I just sit up out of body, and I sit there and try to talk to them, and I said, why you know, why? And he said, I basically said, I realized that this is wrong. Everything that I've done has been wrong. And he said, I feel like I've lost my soul. And he said, I shot myself in the head. And I said, go to the light, go home, rest, you know, don't hang around here. And he said, I can't. And I said, why? He said, because I've lost my soul. And he said, I said, but no, you haven't. You just lost your illusions. And he said, but if I go, what are they going to do to me? So suicide is a sin. And I said, he said, what am I going to be met with there? And I said, love. You're going to be met with love. You know, there's no punishment. You're not going to be punished for this. You know, yeah, you know, you shouldn't have taken your life. But under the circumstances, you know, go home. You just go home. And he came back a second night, the next night. You know, and he told me his name. And he told me where he'd been stationed. And you know, and he said, I really want my parents to know that I love them and that I just couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, you know, if I can find them, I will try. I haven't been able to find them. But this is all because it started out with astral projection. And so I felt like it was important for that reason to start talking about it. I hadn't really talked about astral projection to anybody but a few friends before that, but I've spoken all over the place about it now. I think it's very important that people know. In the first place, you know, I always said if I could give every person in the world one gift, it would be one lucid out-of-body experience, because it changes your life forever. You know, changes your fear of death. You know, you lose your fear of death, or at least 98% of it, you know, you just lose your fear. And you experience bliss, really, real bliss for the first time in your physical life. You know what bliss is. And you kind of know what you really are, you know, and you don't take this quite as seriously anymore. And so it was my hope when I first started speaking that other people would be able to do the same thing, and I know that some have begun doing the same thing, and it's, you know, it's a job opportunity, you know? And the payoff is just tremendous peace and serenity. I can sit with dying people now. I just sat with my dad 2 years ago as he passed away with leukemia and talked him through his death process. You know, I would not have been able to do that if not for this. I just lost a friend 3 months ago who died of cancer, and he's actually from up here. And he had called me 3 years ago and asked me if I would mentor him. And I thought, okay, no one's asked me that before. Sure. And so he started coming down. He liked to fish on the coast anyway. He started coming down, and he didn't tell me until about 6 months later that he had cancer, and he'd been fighting cancer for a couple of years. And he fought it hard. You know, he really tried to stay, but what he was really trying to get was an understanding of what death is and how to die in a lucid way and in a dignified way. And so we made plans. You know, we worked on that for 3 years, and we made what I call a visitation agreement. If you've ever been to my website, there's an article on it. We made a visitation agreement, and we promised, because I told him, I said, you know, I can step out in front of a bus tomorrow and just be out of here. It's like that. There's no sense you're going to go first. And but we agreed that whoever went first, we would, you know, and I said, and this is how you do it. You do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do, there's all kinds of ways that they can they can get your attention that people don't even realize. And most people miss those signs. And then the night that he passed away, his family were at the hospital and they called me, and his daughters were crying and, you know, said, we don't know what to do for him, and he's not conscious. He hasn't been conscious for 24 hours. And I said, he's on morphine, right? And they said, yes. And I said, that's the morphine. He can't communicate with you, but he can hear what you're saying. But I promise you, he understands every word you're saying. So anything you want to tell him, you tell him now, because he hears you. And I said, and he will come. He did tell me that he will come and let every one of you know that he's okay. You know, I promise you, it'll be fine. I said, but just talk to him the whole time. Talk to him and let him know that it's okay to go and that you're going to be okay. And I went to sleep, and I don't keep a phone. I don't like electric things around me when I'm sleeping. But that night, I put a cordless phone and my cell phone by my bed because I just had a feeling. And during the night, I felt someone come and just pat me on the shoulder, and I was just instantly awake. And I thought, that's him, that's Mel. And I thought, okay, he's either out of body on morphine, or he just died. And 10 minutes later, the phone rang, and he had just passed. And yeah, I don't know if anybody listened to my last interview. I know you did, with Richard Sullivan. Yeah, I talked about it, and he's been great. He's been great. He has just, his family went from, and they are grieving him, but they're happy also because he's there. I mean, he's doing all kinds of things to let them know that he's there, and it's unmistakable. And I'm so proud of him. He's doing things that I didn't even tell him he could do, that I wasn't even aware that he could do. And I've been amazed. I've really been amazed by it. You know, I miss him. I wish he was still the human part of me, you know, this physical part of me wishes that he could have stayed, because he was a good friend and just a determined learner, you know. And we scattered his ashes about a month after he passed. His family came down to the coast, and we went out in a boat to his favorite fishing spot. And his wife scattered part of his ashes, and one of her daughters was snapping pictures. And in one of the photos, as the ashes are, you know, trailing out over the water, there's this just beautiful white mist just surrounding her that is just beautiful. I mean, it's just a glowing mist. And I mean, it was Mel. I mean, I knew he was there. I just couldn't see him, you know. And they asked me to say a few words before they scattered the ashes, and I wasn't really prepared to say anything. So I just said, Mel, we know you're here. We love you, and save us a good spot. And then they scattered the ashes, took a picture, boom, this beautiful glowing mist, wonderful.
So does that mean he hasn't gone to the light?
Oh yeah.
Because he was still
Oh
there?
yeah.
So he can come back from the
Yes.
light?
Yep. And I told him that before he passed. I said, your family's going to be fine. And he did make me promise that I would be there for his family. So I've been working with his family. Well, the last time was yesterday, actually, because I get emails and calls from them, when they get down or whatever. But I told them, and I told him before, I said, do not hesitate when you leave that body. Your family's going to be grieving, they're going to be crying, and you're going to think you have to stay right there. But go home first. You can come back.
Oh.
You can come back, but go home. Just go home and, get oriented and back in your, in your native environment. But you'll be able to come back. And when I was talking to his daughter on the phone, I told her the same thing. I said, tell your dad not to hang around, that he doesn't have to wait for his body to die. Actually, they put the phone up to his ear and let me talk to him a little bit, and I talked to him for about 2-3 minutes and just told him I loved him, and I said, remember everything we talked about, and you do not have to wait for your body to stop breathing. When you have the opportunity, get out and go home, and you can always come back and let your family know you're okay. And his daughter got back on the phone and she said, oh my God, he opened his eyes and he smiled. And then he closed his eyes again. She said that was the last time he opened his eyes until he passed away. And she said they did tell him that. They each told him they would be fine. They would be okay. Go home and don't worry about us. But let us know you're okay. And so it's been this ongoing series of events since he passed away that it's just been amazing. Some of the things that he's done are just, I need to be in a book because he's done some really cool things for them and for me. So, but all of this, again, goes back to astral projection, starts with this and the possibilities for it are just endless. I mean, I could never have even dreamed of doing any of this stuff with astral projection. To me, it was a fun thing. And it was an anomaly. It seemed to be an anomaly, but it was fun. And I could never have imagined any of this. It was all shown to me. And so I thought that it was important to share it and, tell other people, because there's a real opportunity there. And if you learn to do it, when you learn to do it, everybody does it every night, whether they know it or not. Everybody goes out of body every night. Most of them just kind of hover over their physical body and rest, but you already project. Everybody does it. But, if you're so inclined, to say, hey, I have this skill, I've learned how to do this, or I've done this once or twice, can you use me? And then have no expectations. Because if you start thinking, well, okay, they're going to have me do this, they'll surprise you. There's just endless possibilities for it. It's just, it's endless. I can't even imagine what some people are doing out of body. This is what I am doing and have been doing. There's a lot more to it, but that's the gist of it anyway.
Susan? Okay, that's perfect right there. And take a break and then do a question and answer.
Okay.
Q&A, 10-minute,
Yeah.
bathroom break, water
I have
break.
some things I'm going to tell y'all too that I don't think are in books. I don't think they're in books, and I think that they'll be kind of interesting. And like I was telling you, I never read a book about astral projection until I was in my 20s. I didn't know anybody else was doing this, and that was a good thing because it might have limited my expectations. And so I have some things that I don't think are in books, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit too.
Thank you.
Yeah, if anybody's new.